Hello, OpAmp here, and what I have for you today is something a little bit different. I'm going to be going through this technique to create 3D printable pick handles in Fusion 360, but it should be extendable to really any CAD package. What I'm using is this sort of cheap dimple pick that you can get. It usually comes with this handle that feels like it's a piece of hose. Not great feedback through that. It's sometimes a little squishy. Mine were actually oily and like disintegrating when I got them, so I decided to print up some custom handles. So it's a fairly simple design, just made to the custom dimensions, the length that was comfortable in my hand, the diameter that was comfortable in my hand. And the pick just slides right in there. Put a little dab of epoxy or something to hold it, and you're done. So the first step is to measure. I have my digital calipers right here. And the essential measurements, which I've already made, so I'm going to sort of just act it out here. We want to measure the width. We want to measure the thickness. And then we want to measure a couple other things. We want to get our overall length here. And then I also want to measure, just in case we need it, length to the bottom of this little shoulder and the top of the little shoulder here. And that should sort of give us a little outline so we could almost recreate this pick. And I'll show you later that I've actually done that. Not because it's necessarily, just because it was sort of nice to have. So I'm going to go back into the computer and we'll show you how it's done. Okay, so we're here in Fusion 360. This is the model of that handle that you saw in the intro. As you can see here, I've actually modeled sort of a rudimentary pick. It's not as smooth as one would like, but it sort of gives an idea of how things will fit in there. And you can turn that off and you'll see that it's set up to have sort of a slot in the middle, and the slot is offset. And that way when the pick is put in there, the pick actually rotates around the center of the axis here. So you really get a nice rotation. Had I just modeled that slot right in the middle, you would have where the pick would rotate, but instead of the tip of that pick rotating around the center, like it is here, you would actually get it sort of like levered off center, and that would be a little bit awkward to pick with. So in any case, we're going to go in here to a new setup here. And I always like to make a new component for everything just because it helps organize things. And if you want to copy, paste, recreate things in a different configuration, different size, have multiple versions, this is a very good way to do it. So I'm going to name this one pick handle 1. So now I'm going to define a sketch, and so I'm going to do create sketch, and since I want it to sort of come out horizontally, I'm going to just use this plane right here. So now we're looking at what it says is the front of the model. This is our origin point right here, and I'm going to go and first sort of define the outside of my pick handle. Now this one's going to be round. If you don't want round, if you're using it for a standard pick, something like that, where you maybe wanted a different shape, very easy to do. I'll show you how to do that also. So there's two ways that I can create this circle. I can do sketch and then circle and create a circle from there. Or there's a shortcut, which is S, and that brings up shortcuts in Fusion 360, and I can do circle. Whoops. Got to spell that right. And I'm going to do a center diameter circle. So I'm going to click here and drag for the diameter. And the measurement that I wanted for mine was 12 millimeters. So I'm going to enter in 12 right there. And now I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on it, since really I'm going to be working within these constraints. So the next thing that I want to do is define that cutout. And this is like a very quick model. This is not so complex in terms of modeling. So I had measured that slot as I'm going to make it 2 millimeters high, and then 5.6 wide. And now I actually measured slightly thinner in terms of the pick. It was actually 1.8 millimeters and 5.4. But I'm going to give it a little bit of wiggle room because I know my printer. I know I need a little bit more room for tolerances. And because I also know that I'm going to put a dab of epoxy in there to hold it, it shouldn't really be too much of a problem. You can go with exact measurements and then adjust later in your slicer. I'm going to start by also defining that offset. So I measured the thickness of the piece, the thin piece that goes up to the tip where the pick gets thinner. And I had measured that as a millimeter wide. So what I'm actually going to do is offset that slot by 0.5 millimeter so that I am able to center the shaft that's coming out of the handle, so that center of rotation is right around the center. So first thing I'm going to do is make a couple of construction lines, and I can hit L. L will bring up a line. I can also hit this tool up here for line. And I'm just going to click on my center, drag it out to this point, and then I'm going to drag it back to that point. I'm then going to do the same thing, drag it up, drag it down. And this is just going to sort of divide up my circle so that I sort of have a way of centering things and working in that way. Now, if I click on that and I hit X, that makes it a dotted line. That's a construction line. So that's not actually a line that is used in the model. It's used to aid you in modeling. But this way I sort of have an offset. Now this is just my diameter line. So that's just the measurement. And I can actually even stick that out here. What I'm going to go for next, and I'm just going to save this quickly, Control S and Enter. I'm going to go and make an offset of that 0.5 millimeter so that I know where I'm starting from. So I'm just going to come in a little bit on the center here. And I'm going to make a line right here. And I'm going to put 0.5. And that's going to be my 0.5 millimeter line right there. And then from that, I can then make, I usually like to do things in pairs so I can adjust things a little bit easier. There are different techniques. This is sort of a simpler technique versus some techniques where you will parametrically model things where they're mirrored and things like that. I'm just going to go for a pure sort of easier version here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rectangle. And if I click up here, that's a 2-point rectangle. That's totally fine for what we're doing. There are other types of rectangles you can get into. And now I'm going to drag up and over because that's the direction I want to go. And I want to go 1 up. And then if I hit Tab, I was going to go 5.6 millimeters out. And you can see we've got our rectangle formed right there. I'm going to hit Enter, and it's going to make our rectangle. Now all I'm going to do is repeat the same thing. So I'm going to make that rectangle, come up here, right from our corner here. So R for rectangle, click in the corner, and we're going to go out 5.6, and we're going to hit Tab and go 1. So now we've got all our lines and our measurements here, 5.6, 1, and our 0.5 offset. So I'm going to come and zoom out a little bit. I'm going to do a little save again. And you can see now we've got this sketch that's defined on this plane here if we look. So what I really want to do now is I'm going to extrude this out. And the distance that I want to make that extrusion is 82 millimeters. So what I'm going to do is click in here, and you can see now that I have this fully defined, these bounds, it's only highlighting the outside. I'm going to hit E for extrude, and I'm going to hit 82. And now you can see it looks a little strange. So what I'm going to do is rotate it out for you. And you can see we have this cylinder with this cutout that's 82. and I like how that's looking. I'm going to hit enter. So now we have this solid model, and it's nice, but these edges right here are going to be a little harsh on your fingers. So what we can do is go and fillet them, or we can chamfer them. So if you click on the ends here and you right click, you can do fillet, or you can hit F as a shortcut. And now I'm sort of just going to play with it. So how does two look? 2 looks okay. Maybe I want to go for 4. 4 looks nice and rounded. So let's say we're going to do 4 there. I'm going to come around to the other side here, F for fillet, and I'm going to do 4 there. I can also select both of those at the same time if I'd like, but it's not really necessary. So now I've got my model right here, and really this is ready for printing. So I'm going to go into Slicer and prepare that for printing now. So we're ready to slice the model. I'm going to select that model, click Make, and there's some tutorials about how to actually get this into your slicer. I use Simplify 3D, so it's a custom print utility defined here, but there's lots of tutorials about that. And it's just going to take a minute. You saw it made that STL with all the polys. And I usually like to take this model and actually print it laying down. If you're confident in your printer, you could print it up with the layer lines like this. I happen to like my layer lines sort of going this way. It gives me a little more grip. So I'm just going to take that and give it a little bit of rotation here. Let's see, maybe 90 degrees rotation. And the other little tip, if you're printing something like this, is since there's going to be bridging in the middle here, I like to print in this orientation. If you print it on its side, so like this, what's going to happen is you're going to wind up bridging this very large area instead of that small area over there. So that'll just help you, because printing support inside of this is not so practical just because it's so long and thin. Cleaning that out is going to be hard. So that's why I would keep that oriented this way. And I'm using a 0.3 layer height with 5% infill. But really, whatever you're comfortable with is fine. It'll be much smoother if you use a finer layer height. I sort of like the tactile grip that this gives me there. Let me just show you quickly some other shapes that could be made. If we go back into our original sketch here, I'm going to double click. And let's say just for some reason, I felt like making a really squat handle that was cut off. So a couple of ways I could do this, and this is sort of just a quick and dirty. If I wanted to chop this at a certain point, I would probably make a guideline coming up from here. And let's say I want to chop it at 3.5. So I have 3.5 here, and I'm going to make another line coming out from that point across to there. And now I'm going to make another line here, and we'll do again 3.5. And I'm going to make another line, so starting there as a guide and coming back across, it'll snap over to the edge there. And now what I can do is stop the sketch, and you'll see nothing's changed yet. But if I go down here to my history and I click on my original extrude, you can see there's different zones, and I'm going to deselect these 2 zones right there. And you can see instantly that the shape here has changed. And that's really nice, because let's say I wanted something that's a little bit more like that. And now you see I got a couple of errors because those fillets that were there before can't be created. Not a problem. I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to hold Control and start clicking all the edges right here. And I'm just going to do all of them right now. It may be better for you to do them separately because you want them the fillets to be a different radius. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to sort of quick and dirty demonstrate it for you. So I've got all my edges selected. I'm going to hit F for fillet, and we'll try a fillet of 2. And you can see already there, here's our shape. So very easy to sort of modify this. And by going back into my sketch here, I can even do things like change, let's get the front view again here, like change this distance 0.5 to something else. So if I make it 2, you can see right there, I've now shifted over the center hole, and you can see where it's shifted. And this is a really neat way to be able to parametrically do this, because let's say I wanted to now take this model and chop it in half, because maybe I want 2 halves and I'm going to slide a traditional pick in there. You know, obviously I would change the numbers for the width if that's a problem, the height here. An easy way to do that is I could do construct mid plane. I would click on this plane here and the bottom plane here, and you can see there's a plane right in the center now. So I'm going to click OK. And if I bring up, I can either do modify split body, or I can hit S and then split. And I'm going to do split body. And the body I'm splitting is the whole thing here. And so my splitting tool is this plane, this cutting plane. And now what will happen when I click OK is these actually become 2 different bodies. And if I go into my body menu, you can see I can take one on and off. I can also get rid of the visibility on this plane, either clicking the light bulb or hitting V. And now you can see I've got these 2 halves, this half and that half. And what I can do is bring those into a slicer, print them as 2, sandwich a pick in the middle, and glue that together. That can also be for the dimple pick if you don't want to have it inserted. So I hope this has been a useful tutorial. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you have a workflow that you prefer, let me know. If you want to see more of these sort of 3D modeling, lock picking, crossover videos, or any sort of other technique, let me know. If you want to see some more advanced techniques where you're really making a lot of very well-defined user parameters and you just enter a bunch of numbers and it generates that model, we can do that too. So thank you for watching. This has been OpAmp.